Okay. Cool. So this is Pro Tools, just real quick. This is what Pro Tools looks like. I've got a song loaded up here. I can zoom out and so you can see the whole song. I can zoom in. And as you can see, if you're used to using Logic, it's very similar to Logic. You've got all your tracks, the track names and stuff like that are on the left. Up across the top is a bunch of information for you, and you've got your transport here so you can play and stop and record and all that stuff. Just like in Logic, the space bar will play and stop things, and various shortcuts will record and loop and all these different things. Like I said, if you're used to Logic, if you've used Logic like you did in Mod 1, then Pro Tools is going to be pretty much exactly the same. It's just which button do you push and where are some certain things in the menus and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's very same-ish, let's say. If I go over here into this other view, I have my mix window here. In the mix window, I can show you different stuff. See, we can see all the different tracks, and I can make those tracks wider. So now they're wider here, and I can go down here in the bottom on the lower left-hand corner, and I can see or get rid of some of the information here. So I don't need to see F and J for my sends or inserts, so I can just go ahead and turn those off, and I could show different things. And see down here in the lower left-hand corner, I'm just clicking around and showing different things, and I can click away from it. And this is what I'm looking at here. So I have basically two main windows in Pro Tools. I've got my mix window here and my edit window over there. And one of the main things, one of the first things we're going to talk about today is shortcuts. And the very first shortcut that I want you to remember is Command equal. That's the Command and equal key. And that will show you all the shortcuts. Actually, you know what I'll do? Later on, I'll get a keyboard video. I got a camera right here, and I can actually have a video of my keyboard here. And I'll get that going during the next break at 10:30. We'll get that going so you can see my keyboard shortcuts. I'll set that up real quick for you. So anyway, let's just dive into the notes here a little bit. So a little bit of history about Pro Tools real quick. It actually started off as a company called DigiDesign, and it was in like around 1988. It's a very old program. It's the first DAW program. It's the first program that allowed you to record audio into your computer. In the beginning, it was like 4 tracks or something like that, 2 tracks, 4 tracks. It was very, very small, and it ran off the computer. Now, if you've been around for any length of time, you know that computers in 1988 were very, very old compared to now. I mean, old obviously because 1988, but they were very, very, they didn't have a lot of power. They were very weak compared to today's computer. So the early versions of Pro Tools couldn't do a lot of stuff. And in fact, they couldn't even do real-time signal processing. So what does that mean? Well, that means is that if I take, let's see here, let's get this guitar here. I'm going to go ahead and solo out this guitar. I'm going to put it in the center. So I have this guitar part here, and if I want to, I can go ahead and stick an EQ on this guitar to equalize the guitar, to change the frequencies of my sound. And what I can do is I can just click right here and go ahead and choose one of my EQs here. I'm just going to choose this one band EQ. And this one here will be really easiest for us to hear what we're doing here. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a high pass filter on here. And I'm going to hit play. And I'm just going to pull this up, and we can hear the sound change over time. Hear that sound change? Right? Pretty cool. And this is happening in real time. Okay? You can hear it as it's doing it, which is pretty neat. Okay? Well, that was something you could not do in the beginning when they first made Pro Tools, because the computers just were not powerful enough to do that. So back in the 80s, in the early 90s, Pro Tools, you couldn't do it like that. You had to do it a different way. You had to use what they call Audio Suite plugins. We're going to be talking about Audio Suite plugins in another class and extensively. So we're not going to get into that right now, but just trust me, it's not super fun. It's not super useful for doing an actual mix of a song. In the early 90s, finally like 91, 92, they made like real-time Audio Suite plugins. And these were plugins that could work in real time, like the one I just showed you. So you could hit play and you could actually do stuff with the sound. They weren't super powerful. The computers were still not powerful in the 90s, so you couldn't do a lot. And one of the things is that you're always restricted by how powerful your computer is. So if you have a really nice computer, like I'm running a Mac Mini with 32 gigs of RAM, and it's got an i7 quad core chip or something like that. then that, that computer, my computer can just conquer things all day and all night. It's a great little computer. I highly recommend them for the price. Rilla says, yeah, it's not, your computer's not so powerful. Yeah. So you're going to be more restricted to how much you can do with your computer. So things like that haven't changed. It's just in general, the computers have gotten a lot more powerful. So what DigiDesign did was they made a thing called the TDM system. That stands for time division multiplexing. Nobody in the world knows that, and especially now because they don't even use the word TDM anymore. But that's what it was back in the beginning. Basically what this was it did the processing for Pro Tools on separate hardware. So if you look down here on my picture, you had your computer over here and you had these DSP boxes connected to the computer, and those DSP boxes, they had chips in them, and those chips were specially designed for Pro Tools. So you could do more stuff. So those became the HD systems, and now it's called Ultra. So if you're using it nowadays, you can use Pro Tools Ultra, and you can use that on your computer natively, or you can also use it with the external HD systems or the DSP boxes. So we have two different systems here. One is the native system, which is what most people use, and all the processing is done on the computer. So you're limited to only how powerful your computer is. Then there are now it's Ultra, it used to be called HD, before that it was called TDM, and that's where the processing is done on DSP chips. And now it's like it's a balance. Some of the processing is done on your computer, some of the processing is done on the DSP chips. What this enables you to do is get more tracks, more effects plugins, you can upgrade it, and it's got lower latency. So there are some advantages to it, but it's very expensive to get into that system with the hardware. You're gonna spend, these days, the cheapest is probably $5,000 or $6,000 just for the Pro Tools part of things. So that's not even including your computer. All right. So eventually everything kind of moved forward, and Pro Tools has been through a lot of different iterations and software upgrades and hardware upgrades and stuff like that. And now we're in version, it's Pro Tools 12, but they don't call it by numbers like that anymore. What it's now, it's called, they just have this version up here in the right-hand corner. So it says Pro Tools, and mine says 2020.5.0. And what that means is it's from the year 2020, and it's May. So it's May 2020 is when this version of Pro Tools is from. I'm actually not sure if that's the latest version of Pro Tools. There might be like a later one from like this month or something like that. I'm not really sure. They usually update Pro Tools once every 3 or 4 months. And when you buy Pro Tools for $300 outright for the student price, you get upgrades for a year. And if you have the subscription, which is what I do, I pay $100 a year, and I get updates just ongoing. So eventually over time, that's going to be pretty expensive, but $100 a year is fine. It's like what, like $8 a month or something like that. All right, so, okay. So a couple things about getting started with Pro Tools. Once we are getting started with Pro Tools, if you're opening up a new session, let me just go ahead and close the session out for just a second. And we're going to open up a new session. I'm going to hit Command N to open a new session. And this is going to pop up right here. Yasani, what is up? Yasani, how you doing? Sunny, cool. Got you. All right, so this is my Pro Tools opening splash window here, and a couple things. I'm going to just go ahead and zoom in on this so you can see what's happening here. And what we've got here is we've got 3 tabs over here on the left. We've got Create, Recent, and Projects. And Create is if I want to create a new project. Recent is if I want to open up something I was working on previously. And then Projects are for things that you're working on through the internet. So you can see up here in the upper right-hand corner, it wants me to sign in. I don't usually sign in, although maybe I should. But basically, projects are things that I can work on with people in different studios in different parts of the world. So if everybody has a nice fast internet connection, you can actually work through the internet on projects together. It's a pretty cool thing that you can do with Pro Tools. And but right now we're not gonna do that. We're gonna go over here and go to create a session from scratch, and I'm gonna call this one 2010 W12, which is your class AM start. Let's see, or intro. Let's call it intro. PT intro. There we go. Take out that dot. Cool. So I'm going to store this on my local storage, which is just going to be on my internal hard drive here, or an external hard drive, whatever I want to do or you want to do. Collaborate and cloud backup, which is the project sign-in required. I'm not going to do that. I can create from a template. We're going to talk about that in a different class. Down here, let's take a look at these file types and stuff like that. And if you look in the notes that I provided for you, it actually shows you all the stuff that I recommend. So this is what is in the notes, and I'm just going to go ahead and go through it here. So what is up, Neem? How you doing? Smalls down here, boom. What is this? Official Masquerade says, what is this? Oh, Handle. What's up, Handle? How you doing? Nice to see you again, man. Nice to see you again. And Official Masquerades, this is a Pro Tools class, so welcome, join us, hang out, ask interesting questions, and you get to stay. All right, so file type here. I recommend WAV file. There are two different file types here, WAV and AIF. AIF is a Mac file type that was made by Apple computers back in the day, and WAV is just a generalized file type. They're both uncompressed, and they both allow you to save data and stuff in them. I recommend using WAV just because it's way more compatible across the board. And then over here is the sample rate. Sample rate, if you're doing audio stuff, you want to use 44.1 or 88.2. If you're doing video stuff, you're going to use 48 or 96. And then you have these higher ones as well on mine. You may or may not have these here. 176.4 is for audio, and then 192 is for video. So basically, you could just use 44.1 and it's fine. It'll get you through and do everything you need it to do. If you're doing more like classical or acoustic sessions, things like that, you may want to use 88.2. But for now, I just recommend using 44.1. Bit depth over here, this is our sample rate. Sorry, it's not our sample rate, that's our sample rate. This is our bit depth, 16-bit, 24-bit, 32-bit float. I recommend 24-bit for now. That's just, again, it's more like across the board, just compatible. Now, over here, there's a little button here that says interleaved. You should definitely push that button all the time, every time. Always keep this button pressed. Once you press it, it's going to stay pressed. You have to unpress it. There's not really a reason to unpress it. What this does, if we look at the notes actually tell you, what interleave does is it makes sure that your file type, your files are together in one file. So if I have a stereo file, which if you're using speakers, I've got two speakers on the side, I've got two headphones on. So we're always using stereo speakers. We're always using stereo headphones, stereo speakers, things like that. So those files though, it's gonna be one file. Our left and our right are gonna be together in one file, and that's called interleaved. Interleaved, like interlocking together, interleaved. So we've got one file, but that has two channels on it, okay? If it's not interleaved, that's just called non-interleaved, that would be two separate files. And so you'd have a left file and a right file. iTunes, various programs, they don't know what to do with this. They would just play the one file, the left or the right side, and it would be mono. So you can have Pro Tools so it splits things up like that and it uses everything individually. That's like an older thing that old versions of Pro Tools used to do. Some people still like to use Pro Tools like that, so you might end up in a studio where the owner of the studio or whoever's in charge likes to use things split up left and right. But for the most part, I recommend that you use interleaved. So that's this button right here. Please always press that button when you're in my class. Then over here we have I/O settings, and usually you can use last used, but not always. And I want you to get in the habit of using the stereo mix, or if you have set up your own I/O settings, then use those. Like you can see here, I've got my Tony I/O settings. We will talk about I/O settings and how to set those and what they do, stuff like that, in another class. Okay, so I've got these here, stereo mix. I'm going to choose stereo mix just to make sure everything is default. And then over here, we can either prompt for location, which means that when you hit go, Pro Tools is going to ask you where to save it. Or I can tell it a specific location on my hard drive. And here we can just say it's in users, Tony Grund, documents, sound, Pro Tools projects. So when I hit create, it's going to go ahead and create the project for me, and it makes a blank project. Now, where did it just create that project? Well, you kind of have to know that. I know where it is. I'm going to go over here and show you. It created it in the sound folder and then Pro Tools projects. And then over here, it's inside here, and here it is right up here. Let's go ahead and look inside of here, and we're going to skip ahead in the notes a little bit over to, oh, wait, yeah. We're going to skip ahead into the notes over to the end of things, just to kind of take a look at the folder structure that it just created for us. Now, no matter what DAW you're using, for example, Official Masquerades says he uses Ableton, so great, me too, but didn't want to learn about Pro Tools, which is fine. I think it's always a good idea to learn about everything, just because you never know where you're going to end up. But in our case, we're focused on Pro Tools right now. So what's going to happen, and what you're going to see in just a second once I show you again, is the folder I just made, the session I just made, it made a folder, and that folder is right here. It's called the same name as my project, 2010 W12 AM PT Intro. And I open this up, and now inside of here, it put all these folders, and it put some other files in here as well. So let's just take a look at what these files are. And I've actually got them listed right here. So the .ptx file is my Pro Tools session file. It's got all the data. It's what you save and stuff like that. You definitely do not want to delete this one, and that's why I have a little asterisk next to it, is because it's to just make you understand. Please do not delete this. If you see it in there, please do not delete it. So do not delete these. Do not put them in the trash. So the intro here is that. Don't delete it. Then we have the audio files, and the audio files folder, it's where if I'm recording audio, it's going to end up in this audio files folder. This is arguably more important than the Pro Tools PTX file right here. You definitely always want to make sure you're keeping the audio files folder. Do not trash this, because you could recreate the stuff in the PTX file. With the audio files, you probably can't recreate that because it's a performance. Then over here, we've got our, let's see what else we got. Oh, the session file backups. This is another very important one. The session file backups. These are actually, here, let's see, did it save anything yet? No. So every increment of time, like 5 minutes or 3 minutes or something like that, Pro Tools is going to save a backup, and it's going to save as many as you want it to save. You can change that in the session, in the preferences. And so you might end up with a whole bunch of these, you might end up with a few of them, whatever. They're basically just the same as this one here. You can open these up. It's really great for if you make a mistake with something, you need to go back in time, or Pro Tools crashes or something like that. What's up, Six Guns? Oh, no, Six Guns, no. Sorry, buddy. Sorry. No, you can't come in here and just like drop a YouTube video on me. Unless you're in my class, that would be weird. All right, so I'm harsh like that, by the way, y'all. Okay, so we got here the wave cache, and the wave cache is basically just a redrawing of your waveforms in the session. You don't need to actually have this in here. You can actually delete this one and it will remake it for you. So you can go ahead and get rid of that. That's no problem. Or you can keep it in there. Just keep it in there though. You don't need to get rid of it. I'm not telling you to get rid of it. I'm just saying if you trash it, it's not the end of the world. Audio files, if you got rid of those, it would be the end of the world. Session file backups, if you got rid of those, you probably wouldn't be too happy. The PTX file, definitely don't get rid of those. And then down here, bounced files. This is where if you bounce your song out, if you bounce it to a 2-track stem or something like that, it's gonna end up in this folder right here. So you don't want to delete that. Then you've also got clip groups and you got video files. Clip groups is if you make any groups of clips, they're going to end up in here, and then video files will end up in here if you're using video stuff. So that's where all the different Pro Tools stuff is. Now check this out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close this session. To close it, it's Command-Shift-W, so I'm going to go ahead and close it. And when I close it, look what just happened. Everything just disappeared out of this folder. Now, the reason why everything just disappeared out of the folder is because there's nothing in there yet. So any folder that's created by Pro Tools that is empty is going to get deleted. So there's no wave cache because I didn't have any wave files in there, and there was no audio files and nothing recorded yet. So there's no audio files in the audio files folder. There's nothing in the clip groups folder. There's nothing in the backup folders even because I didn't give it a chance to back it up. So, oh, actually, sorry, I'm lying. There is something in the backups folder. Oh, I did give it a chance to back up. It backed it up. Yep, I've got it set for 3 minutes. And you can see here's this one here. If I open this up, it's just going to be the same exact session as we just had. So that's the only folder that survived that's still in there. And as you start to do things in Pro Tools, as you start to add stuff in and utilize Pro Tools, more and more of those folders will still exist. But for the time being, it's just this Pro Tools session. So what we've got here one more time is you've got the Pro Tools session folder, which is the overall session folder here. That's this one here. And if I open that up, inside of it, I've got all this different stuff. If I go ahead and open up this file, I'm going to double click it. It's going to open up Pro Tools. There we are. And all that stuff is going to be back in there again. So there you go. Fun with Pro Tools. Yes. All right. 2010 W12, a certain format. No, you don't need to use that. That's just for me. That's your class number. You don't ever really need to. I mean, it's good for you to know that you're in class 2010 W12, but it's not, you don't need to know that. Or you don't need to worry about that for your Pro Tools naming nomenclature. For you, what you should do is always put your name, or your first initial last name, and then whatever project it is that you're working on, and that's what I'd like for you to do for stuff, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right. So what we're going to do here real quick is I'm going to back up here a little bit. We're going to go back to here, and let's talk about plugins for a second. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my session that I was working on before here, Rubadoo. Now, Rubadoo is one of the sessions that you're going to be using for your Pro Tools editing project. So you're going to get very familiar with this if you choose to use this. And this is what it's going to look like when you first open it up. So I recommend making it look how you want it to look. I don't like the narrow mix windows. It does allow me to have more channels on my mix, but I don't like the way that it looks in general. There we go. There's that. I'm going to go ahead and move this over so I can see what y'all are saying to me. I'm just adjusting this because this is session was there. We go. Awesome. Perfect. So we've got this here. Here's my Rubadoo, and this is what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and make everything a little bit softer here. I'm going to make everything a little bit quieter. I'll just turn everything down here so it's not clipping anything. And so what we're looking at here is my mix window, and we're going to go back and check out one of the acoustic guitars. Let's do the same thing we did before. Let's use this acoustic guitar here. And I'm going to make sure it's left and right. There we go. There's this. Cool. Okay. So as we saw a bit ago when I was explaining about plugins and I was explaining about EQs and stuff like that, up here, I went up here and I showed y'all a plugin. So these are what we call inserts, and there's two different types of effects in these DAWs, which you probably heard before. And this is just in audio in general. You've got your insert effects and you've got your send effects. And these, in Pro Tools, the inserts are on the line directly. So like if you're a guitar player, that would be like your guitar pedal, like your distortion pedal, your compression pedal, your reverb pedal. That would be like an insert. It's directly in the chain. It's inserted into the signal flow. Then you have a send effect, which is down here, which is taking the signal and it's sending it somewhere else. It's going to take that signal and send it out to another place. Okay, so the insert is directly on the signal, and the send effect is sending it somewhere else. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the insert effects right now. And the reason why we're going to talk about these is because these are what we call plugins. And you can see here, see it says plugin. The word plugin is spelled different ways. It can be plugin, plug-in, or it can be plugin as one word. So it's all the same stuff. So over here, you can see I have a whole bunch of plugins from a whole bunch of different companies here. I've been collecting plugins for years and years and years and years, and I subscribe to different ones like Slate and some other ones and stuff like that. I've got the UAD plugins, a whole bunch of stuff going on here. So what we're going to use here right now, let's go ahead and put a filter on here, and let's use a UAD filter. Now this is the filter that actually, you know what, never mind. Let's use a filter that you actually have with Pro Tools, you have access to. When you're at school using the computers at school, you do have access to the UAD plugins. So I will be using the UAD plugins sometimes, but let's start off with just one that comes with Pro Tools. We're going to use the Air Vintage filter here. So I've got this filter. I open it up, and there we go. Cool, no problem, Caden. How you doing? Let's see here. There you are. Cool. All right. So here is my filter. And if I click on this, you see I can move these things around. I can click and drag it up. So I'm going to drag that up like that. I'm going to put my resonance down, turn the fat down like this. Actually, let's put that back at 100%. And I've got different modes and stuff like this. Now you can see, let's go ahead and listen to this. See how you can hear the sound changing? If you're a guitar player, it sounds kind of like a wah-wah pedal. Right? And you can hear that's changing the sound. Well, this is a plugin. It's an effect, but it's a plugin effect. And there's two different types of plugins. There's instrument plugins and effect plugins. And this effect plugin is changing the sound. Now, a plugin is like a program within a program. That's what's in the notes here. A plugin is a program within a program. There are two types of plugins. There are effects plugins and there are instrument plugins. The effect plugins change the sound and the instrument plugins create the sound. So I have my Pro Tools, which is the program itself. That's the main program. And then inside of that program, I've got these plugins, which are little other programs. Now, I can't use the plugins without the main program. So if I have some plugins that I install, some effects and stuff like that, I can only use them inside of Pro Tools or Logic or Ableton Live. They all use the same word. It's all plugins. I can use them inside the DAW, but I can't use it outside the DAW unless it's like an instrument. Instruments you can usually use as what they call standalone applications. So instruments oftentimes will be their own app on your computer, but effects are always going to work inside of another program. But they both can work inside of a program inside of a program, and that's why it's called a plugin. Lots of different types of software uses plugins. For example, Photoshop uses plugins, and Adobe Premiere uses plugins. A lot of different stuff. It's not just audio programs. Other things use plugins as well. So we've got effects plugins and we've got instrument plugins. An instrument plugin creates the sound, an effect plugin changes the sound. So for example, if I wanted to make an instrument plugin here, I would make a different type of track. I use Command-Shift-N to change the track type, and I'm going to go here and I've got my track type here, and I'm going to make it stereo. I'm going to make it an instrument track, and I'm going to just call this one synth, whatever, a very generic name. And on this synth track, I'm going to go ahead and put a synth in here. I can go to instrument here, and I'm just going to click over here and find an instrument that I like. Ooh, let's use, do I have vacuum? Oh, I don't have vacuum. Oh, I do have vacuum. There we go. Boom, let's use vacuum. Vacuum comes with Pro Tools. It's a very cool sound. So I've got this right here. And now if I go ahead and solo that out and hit play, great, why do we not? Oh, I know why. Okay, output one. Okay, boom. So there we go. You can hear my synth sound, and I'm playing this. I'm playing a keyboard over here on the left-hand side of my computer, and you can hear me playing it. And I can go ahead and change sounds in here, and change things up. Right? And that is an instrument plugin. I'm not going to keep going with that because I'm just showing you what an instrument plugin is. But that's an instrument plugin. And you have samplers, and you have drum machines, and you have synthesizers, all sorts of different things. Basically, you can do everything inside of your computer these days, and it's pretty amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete that track. And to delete something in Pro Tools, what you do is you right-click on the track, and you go down here and you go to delete. Or the other way to do it is you make sure the track is highlighted, and you go to track, and you go to delete. Boom, now it's deleted. Actually, I should set up a shortcut for that in my computer. Anything that you have up here in your menu, you can set up a shortcut on a Mac for that. And actually, I can show you all how to do that a little bit later. So now we've got our guitar, and we've got this filter on it. Great. Sounds good. So that's an effect plugin. The other one was an instrument plugin. Now, there are two different, there's types of plugins, and then there's who makes the plugins and how does the plugin operate. There's native plugins, which are first-party plugins. Those are the ones that come with the program. Every DAW comes with a bunch of different plugins, and they all sound pretty good these days. I would say that my favorite plugins that come with the program are from Logic. Logic has the best plugins. They just sound amazing. Ableton Live is next, and then Pro Tools is behind on that one. The Pro Tools plugins sound good. I mean, you can use them. They work. The Logic plugins sound fantastic. They sound like professional third-party plugins. And the ones from Ableton Live, they actually do have some third-party plugins in there, and those sound really good. The other ones sound pretty good. Third-party means it's made by, third-party means it's made by another company. So if somebody talks about third-party plugins, you know they're talking about something that's made by another company. And if we look in Pro Tools here, I can show you a list of different plugin manufacturers. So I'm just going to go over here, go down here, and all these names down here, these are all companies that make plugins. So these are all what we would call third-party plugins. They're just from different companies, and there's all sorts of different stuff in here. You can see Output is here. Output's been making some pretty cool plugins recently. Slate Digital, I've got Sonic Academy. Sound Toys, one of my favorite companies, Sound Toys. Spectrasonics makes Omnisphere, which is fantastic. Spitfire makes some really, really cool stuff. I love the Spitfire stuff. You've got Sugar Bytes, great creative plugins. Tau, which has some really great free ones. Yuhei, some awesome synthesizers. Universal Audio, by my favorite sounding plugins for recreations of analog gear and just effects. They don't really make any synthesizers, I don't think. They're mostly effects, and they're my favorite by far, but you have to have hardware to use the Universal Audio plugins. Then we've got Valhalla, which makes great reverbs, and this Supermassive, which is a free plugin from them. It was like a little gift. X4 Records, some great stuff from them, some good synths and things like that. Akai, Arturia, a lot of great synthesizers, and now they've been making more and more effects. And IK Multimedia makes a lot of really great things. Sample Tank, other stuff that I don't have installed right now for some reason, I'm not sure why. Isotope, Ozone, you've probably heard of Ozone. RX, I've got RX5. I thought I had RX, oh, there's RX6 as well. Yep, I've got RX6 as well. Lots of stuff. I mean, there's just so many things in here. Moog, Native Instruments. You kind of have to have Native Instruments complete if you're an electronic music producer. And you can see there's a ton of stuff. So these are all third parties that make stuff for different companies. It's not the stuff that comes with Pro Tools. You have to pay extra money for almost all those plugins. All right, and then there are three different formats of plugins, plugin formats. So we've got the type of plugin, which is effects and instruments. Oh, Charlie says, what, Native Instruments is your favorite? Yeah, probably, right? Yeah, Native Instruments is dope. You got effects plugins and instrument plugins. Then you got native plugins and third-party plugins. Native plugins are made to, that name has two meanings to it. One, it means that works on the computer directly. Remember our TDM plugins versus our native plugins that we learned about over here? We talked about native systems and TDM systems. That's actually where Native Instruments got its name, because it's one of the first plugin companies that made plugins, instruments that ran natively on your computer. IK Multimedia and Native Instruments were two of the first companies that did that. But in this case, native means first-party plugins, plugins that come with the program, and then you got third-party plugins made by another company. Now we've got plugin formats, and this is something you really have to pay attention to. The other stuff you don't really need to pay attention to when you're searching for plugins. If you're searching for a plugin, that's a third-party plugin. If you're wondering about types of plugins, effects, and instruments, you're just going to get to know that as time goes on, as you get better at this stuff. But the plugin formats can be a little bit confusing, and it's very, very important. Different DAWs use different plugin formats or plugin types. So Audio Units is made by Apple, and Logic and Ableton Live can use Audio Units plugins. VST was made by Steinberg, and it's only used by Ableton Live for the Mac. And then AAX is Pro Tools, and that's specific to Pro Tools. So, for example, if I buy an AAX plugin, I cannot use it with Logic or Ableton Live. If I buy a VST plugin, I cannot use it with Pro Tools or Logic, because Pro Tools and Logic do not use VST plugins. You just can't do it. Now, you can buy what they call a wrapper W-R-A-P-P-E-R, wrapper, like Christmas wrapping, gift wrapping, something like that. It's a wrapper. It's basically a box to put a plugin format into. So if I wanted to use VST plugins, or maybe even Audio Units plugins inside of Pro Tools, I could do it with a wrapper. It's a program inside of a program inside of a program. It's like a Russian nesting doll. I've got Pro Tools as the program, and then I've got my wrapping program, which is whatever, and then I've got the plugin inside of it. It's too far, and those have various degrees of success. Some of them work really well. Some of them don't work well at all. So it's use at your own risk is what I'm saying here. So if you have a wrapper and it doesn't work that well, I don't know what to tell you. You're gonna have to not use those plugins, I guess. But from what I understand, let's see if I can just find one for you here. Oops, not you. Let's go over to you, and let's just see what we can find here. Pro Tools plugin wrapper. Let's see. 8 ways to be able to use VST or Audio Units plugins in Pro Tools. Okay, so here's an article about this. Oh, Pro Tools Expert, they're great. Huge fan of Pro Tools Expert. Blue Cat Audio Patchwork, Nugent's Audio Signal, Vienna, Native Instruments, Machine. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I guess you could use Machine. Huh, that's funny. Oh, wow. Oh, they're talking about Rewire. Ha, that's funny. I wouldn't recommend doing Rewire stuff. F expansion. Oh. Okay. So I forgot that F expansion made a wrapper here. VST to RTAS. Oh, that's to RTAS. So it doesn't do AAX. So you can't use that anymore. That's old news. Yeah, okay, yeah, so it says, yeah, Pro Tools 10 and below. Yeah, so you can't use that. It loads, it's a meta plugin, it's a plugin that uses other plugins, it loads other plugins. Okay, yeah, so something like that looks pretty cool, I guess. Is it free? Ooh. Yeah, Pro Tools 11 can host, for example. Well, great, but I don't know where it is. That's a review of it. Okay, anyway. So you can see there are solutions out there if you do a search on the internet for these things. There are solutions out there. So not all is not lost if you have one, but for the most part, most of the ones you're gonna buy come in all three formats. So it's been a long time since I've bought a plugin that doesn't come in all three formats. It's usually the free ones that you run into problems with. So there are a lot of free Audio Units plugins and VST plugins out there that maybe don't have an AAX version of it, because the reality is Pro Tools is not super popular for people making free music or you know, like the pre-professional people. Pro Tools is not the way to go for most of those people. It's usually people who are working professionally in the industry who use Pro Tools. I actually didn't start using Pro Tools until I started working professionally in the industry as well. I got the job in Japan as a producer, and then I realized, oh, I should probably buy Pro Tools because it's going to be much easier for them to work with the studio in Japan. So that's when I bought Pro Tools, and I actually fell in love. I started using it. I was just like, whoa, this is super cool. I really like the way it works. It works with audio really well and allows me to do all sorts of cool stuff. I was using Cubase at the time. I was living in London. I was using Cubase, and it's cool. Cubase is great. A lot of people love Cubase. I didn't love Cubase, but I did love Pro Tools. It was very, very easy to use. And as you know now, I do use Ableton Live most of the time. All right, let's do this. Let's take a pause here, because this is a good place to pause. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.